We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. We're just waiting for some of your colleagues to log into today's session. But thank you very much for joining us today. And we're looking forward to talking about how nonprofits can get help protecting their data. We'll get started in just a minute or two. So we're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, I want to wish everybody a Happy New Year and thank you very much for attending today's session. This is part of our SMB, as you can see, Small and Medium Business Cybersecurity Thought Leadership Series. This was originally put together by the Nodeware Advisory Council. That is a group of business leaders that help us with the issues of the day. And our focus is on providing education to business leaders. Today's case is around nonprofits specifically, but whether it's the CEO, the president, the CFO, the COO, or any of the people in a small organization, how do they get just a little bit smarter? How do they become a little bit safer with all of the cyber security attacks that are coming their way? And at the same time, how do they take the first couple of steps in putting together a cyber program? We've talked about this over the last 6 months with a variety of industry experts, industry icons, from a wide variety of different perspectives, from compliance to MSPs to getting started to education from the folks at the MIT Sloan School of Cybersecurity, on a variety of different topics. But it's all been around, if you're a small organization, what are a few simple steps you can do to protect your critical data? What are a few simple steps you can do to educate your employees? And what are a few simple things that if you get attacked, you can quickly come back to life from a business recovery, business continuity standpoint? So with that, we're going to start today's session. Just a couple of housekeeping things that you see in front of you. We want this to be interactive. There were some questions that were submitted in advance. We're going to get to those. If you have any specific questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And we would like to make this a two-way conversation going back and forth. Also, if there's a particular topic or presenter that you'd like to hear from in the future, please let us know. We do these on an ongoing basis. For some of you that have been involved in the past, we do 1 to 2 a month. And we will have a recording and we will make that available in the next couple of days on a YouTube channel, and we'll send you an email with that link. With that, let me just go to the next slide. We do have a couple of upcoming events. One of the things that people asked us to do going forward was, after these sessions, they wanted to have the ability to not only see a demonstration, but they wanted to hear from their peers. They wanted to ask, end user organizations, small businesses, how are you using Nodeware? As well as, if you're an MSP, how do I help my organizations, and how do I do that? So we have the first one of those coming up on January 27th. If you're interested in attending that, if you want to just listen to the conversation, hear what's on the people's minds, or you can participate, submit questions in advance the same way. And then our next session in the SMB educational series is coming up on February 3rd. John Harden, who's the founder of SaaS Leo, talking about how unknown cyber risks jeopardize business continuity. And we'll be talking about, once again, a variety of different things that you ought to be aware of as a business leader. Those are both on our website. You'll be able to sign up, register for those, submit questions in advance. Before I introduce our two guests today, we do have a poll question that we want to put up just so we can get a feel for the organizations that are on today's sessions, just so you can give us an idea. Now, I realize that we're talking about nonprofits today, and we're talking to nonprofits today. But if you want to think of, nonprofits are businesses too. So we use that terminology, but we're interested in hearing a little bit more about who you are, so we can let our speakers have a good feel for today's audience. So with that, I'll let you spend a second filling that out. I wanted to, if you can move to the next slide. So I wanted to introduce Leda. Leda and I have known each other for a long time from her days at Stanford. She has now become the head of Pocket Security. Pocket Security is a organization that's helping small businesses, small nonprofits, get started, get educated, and starting to provide them the type of security services they need. She'll talk specifically about the business model they have and how that works and how nonprofits can get involved and participate. But we are fortunate enough to have Leda. She is taking on a great cause, serving this huge underserved market, which is of nonprofits that need help. We were talking just a few minutes ago about nonprofits that are getting attacked, that they're just wiping out their data. So it's not a ransomware issue. It's just about stopping the nonprofits from doing what they do. And Leda will have some insights about some things that they're doing to help those organizations be better, be safer, be stronger. And we're fortunate enough to have Debbie Cannon with us. Debbie's the president and CEO of the Academy for Grassroots Organizations. They've been around for about 20 years, focused specifically on how do you help nonprofits and how do you help them be better? How do you help them be stronger? How do you help them do the things that they need to do in a more effective manner? So with that, I want to turn it over to our two distinguished speakers today. Let them talk a little bit about the nonprofits, how nonprofits can get help, and how they're there to help the nonprofit organization. So with that, I will turn it over to Leda.
Great. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you for having us today. And Debbie, thanks for being here as well.
Thank you.
So today, basically, how nonprofits can get initial cybersecurity assistance. Nonprofits, we can go to the next slide. Nonprofits have not been probably aware, we don't know what we don't know. And nonprofits are there to do a mission. They have a mission, they have a vision to serve, to feed, to mentor, and they don't always think cybersecurity is not always at the top of their mind, right? They're out there to do their mission. And what Pocket Security does is what we're there to help educate and make them aware of what is out there. How we go about it is to understand the roles in the organization. And I'm glad from the question we kind of looked at the audience that we have today. A big part of it is understanding the roles within an organization. Nonprofits have caseworkers. They have people in accounts payable. They have outreach coordinators. They have different roles that are doing their job to help with the mission and the vision of the nonprofit. So what Pocket Security does is we go in there to find out what makes up the nonprofit. Who are the different roles within your organization? And we want to understand what information are they touching? What systems are they using? And you're probably doing this too in your small and medium-sized businesses, looking at your applications, looking at the data that is out there, and what are the roles that are handling it. So that's something that is big. Again, what they don't know, what we don't know, and we help them find that out. Going to what we do at Pocket Security is to help educate and create awareness, develop a cybersecurity plan for these nonprofits, understanding risk management, and also, Stuart, like you mentioned earlier, business continuity, to be able to get them up and running again if something happens. We are a nonprofit, so we're there to help the nonprofits to understand to make those informed and strategic decisions with doing it in a safe and secure environment. So we want them to be aware of what they have. The bad guy doesn't care. Those bad actors don't care of the information of who's holding it. If it's a small business, if it's a nonprofit, it's a big business. Data is big money, and we see that with ransomware out there. So we'll go to the next slide. So I wanted to go over a couple of phishing, and you've probably seen these before, of some statistics. From the Verizon data breach report in 2020, phishing was the biggest cyber threat for small and medium-sized business, and accounting for 30% of the SMB breaches. Know before, 37.9% of untrained users failed phishing tests. I had a discussion couple of weeks ago about a phishing campaign that was done within a company, and they said about 50% of their employees failed. Because what happens a lot in those phishing campaigns are people are just going through the motions. You're reading the emails, you're clicking, you're just doing that. And I had a phishing campaign, an internal phishing campaign in an organization. We had about 1,000 employees, and only 2 people clicked on the link. And actually, it wasn't a phishing campaign. It was actually a real phishing campaign. And that was only 2, which was awesome. And what I think made the difference was the education and awareness to our users. It wasn't just sending out an email and having them click and then go to the video. It was having that one-on-one connection with them to be able to make them aware of cybersecurity, make them aware of what's happening out there, that they could relate it to themselves. A story that I tell, I've had this one interaction with this one person who is a custodian within their organization. And there was a cybersecurity awareness fair. And basically they said, what does all this mean to me? You know, because what their job and their role as a custodian within the organization is to make sure the rooms and spaces are clean. And especially now with the COVID, the last 2 years, this is really what they're doing, working really hard. But they get work orders on a device. Okay, so there's technology in their hand. They could be getting an email that they could click on a link, and that could be phishing, and that could cause a disruption. At this awareness fair, when I had this discussion with this custodian, I said, what do you like to do? What do you do in your free time? They like to build cars. They like to work on cars. I said, okay, so if you got an email, you know, when you're out there on the weekend working on your cars, and said in the next 5 minutes, if you click on this link, you can get 100 carburetors for $5. Would you do it? And he went, oh, and he thought about it. So it's just that extra step that we need to take with our organization, with the employees within our organization, to make them more aware of what's happening and how it could be related to them. So, you know, this goes into going on more of these phishing statistics. A new phishing site launches every 20 seconds, right? And they don't care what they're phishing for. 74% of phishing websites use HTTPS. You know, we've taught our users to look at the URL and say, look for HTTPS. It's secure. But 74% of the phishing sites are using that now. You know, they're getting smarter. They're working harder. And 94% of malware is delivered via email. And within small and medium-sized businesses and big businesses, you know, email is a way of connecting with one another. I know there's other collaboration tools that people are using, but still the majority are using email, and this is how malware is being delivered. So we want to get that message to our users to let them know about this information. Next slide. Great, thanks. So NTEN is a nonprofit, and these are statistics that they have gathered within their nonprofit organizations that they've been monitoring. Only 26% of nonprofits actively monitor their environment. That's not a lot, because when you think of the nonprofits, it goes from small nonprofits to, you know, a couple of people, just like a small business, to very large nonprofits. And only 26% of them are actively monitoring what's going on in their environment. 59% of the nonprofits do not provide training to their staff on a regular basis, because again, just like everybody, we get busy, we're doing things. That is a high percentage. When you think about people are using technology, people are on email, they're using applications, and they're not being trained. Again, 56% of nonprofits do not require MFA to log into an online account, right? So that's, again, high a percentage. We've talked to nonprofits about password managers, about MFA, and for some of them, it's a new concept. For many of you, it may not be, but for them, it is, right? And so it's, again, getting that information. They don't know what they don't know, so a lot of it is just getting that information to them, so to make them aware. More than 70% of nonprofits have not even run one vulnerability assessment to evaluate their potential risk exposure. And that is true for the ones that I've dealt with. I think all the ones that I've dealt with so far have never run a vulnerability scan to do that assessment. So, you get these systems, they're working so much in technology and they're not even scanning. I kind of think of it, it just came to, it's kind of like not cleaning house, not vacuuming your house, just letting the dust build up. You don't know what's there. You're not doing that scan, you're not doing that assessment. And only 20% of nonprofits have a policy in place to address cyber attacks, right? That statistic, again, you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't know that this could affect you, then you're not going to put those guidelines in that policy in. And so part of what we want to do is make them aware that, yes, this is out there, and yes, that it can affect anybody. So,
Leda, to that point, prior to, COVID, we had a lot of people who they would run a vulnerability management scan on a Sunday night once a month to try and figure out what devices they might have that might be exploitable. And now with so many people working at home and so many people in a hybrid environment, it's just changed the whole game of when attacks are coming, and you need to be aware of them on a regular basis. So one of the reasons why people are coming to us is because they want to be notified. They want an immediate alert when somebody comes onto their system that they weren't aware of, whether they're working from home or whether they're working in the work environment. They can't wait, 30 days to find out somebody's on their network.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the environment just, prior to COVID, there were people starting to work from home, but now, the hybrid and the remote work is so big. With nonprofits too, the systems that they use, right there, and that'll be the next slide. I'll jump into that, but the data, I'll just address some of the data. The PII data that they're holding, right? Their donor data, the client data, volunteers and board members. And I think Debbie can share a story of what she's hearing out there about the donors and the data and the client data of this information that they have. If I don't want to say it out loud, and I know we're recording this and who's on, but if I was a bad actor, I would be going after nonprofits, right? You can only imagine that this data that they have and how they're managing it is interesting, to say the least. So Debbie, your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, thank you. Yes, we deal with lots of small to medium-sized nonprofits, and we're hearing various things now. Number one, like Leda said, the donor, that when I first started talking to Leda, I was like, oh, how does this apply to nonprofits? And it was like, oh, okay. There's a lot of data around donors, and sometimes they're on the main computers, sometimes they're on the fundraisers iPad, sometimes they're not, so they're all in different places. So keeping them just together is amazing, and then backing them up. And most of the times, again, what we don't know, we don't know. So it's really a great time to help small business and nonprofits learn what they need to know. And a lot of times now with remote work, they get if they get computers for their jobs, they're usually older computers, like we were talking earlier, like 2 to 3 years old. There's no protection on them. There's no protection on their network. They don't even think to run any kind of software on it to see what's going on. And one thing we taught them in the last webinar, of course, Leda did, and I'm proud to say it came into use 3 times this week, of looking at who's sending it, but who are they sending it to? I had 4 different people from the community foundation here who it looked like they were sending me a message, but when I looked at who it was from, it was blank. And I called all 4 of them and they said, no, we didn't send you that. So learning is really, really important also of what are the little tips and tricks you can do. But donor data is massive, because if I'm donating to you, I want my data protected, right? That's very important. Client data, I think, is even more difficult, because you have the actual, wherever the facility is that's working with the people, but now you have everybody's personal health data and records. And again, a lot of that's done on laptops that are not connected. It's done on iPads, things like that. And then even volunteer data. The volunteer data is always at risk, and board data. So it's all the same story, just in different things. But if a donor, I can't even imagine a donor found out that their data was compromised. You know, that's a big problem, or a client, because, you know, all of us sign privacy agreements, and this data won't be distributed, and, you know, all that stuff. But if it's you know, whatever you call it, hacked or something into, they have the data, so they can start contacting people, and eventually it's going to cause a problem back at nonprofits because of those kinds of agreements. You've signed agreements saying your data is protected, we don't share it, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of my thoughts on it.
You know, Debbie, to that point, it's you know, it reminds me a little bit when we've had K through 12 school districts that are customers of ours, and one of the things they're most worried about is all of the parents that have been, you know, supporting the school and providing things through auctions and through fundraisers, and their data is now available at the school, and the school's worried about, you know, getting access to all the personal identifiable information from those parents that are, you know, helping their children and helping the school be successful.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the same thing, your Boys and Girls Club, Girl Scouts, all that data is there that you know, you bought stuff or you supported. Yeah, good point.
So Leda, while this is a public service announcement type of session, and it's supposed to provide broad education, we did get somebody who just asked, you know, how do they get a hold of you if they're interested in help? So
yeah, definitely. You can look for me on LinkedIn, but also pocketsecurity.org is our website. And there on that page, you can contact us, and we can get back to you, or I'm at lmuller@pocketsecurity.org. So those are all the different ways to get a hold of me.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so one more thing about the data, and as we help is, you know, in any business, any organization, have you classified your data, right? And this goes to your classification of data and your risk. That's one of the things that we do start off with too when we meet with a nonprofit, is asking them about the data. You know, do you know where it is? How is it managed? Who has access to it? And have you classified it? You know, if it's public information data, something you put on your public website, great. But again, going back to some of this, your donor data, client data, you're collecting a lot of information, and how is that being managed and who has access? And also one more thing, and I think this in other conferences or meetings that I've been with people, onboarding and offboarding employees and volunteers, so important, so important. Because if you, along the way, when you've hired somebody, they have access to one system. You know, they've been somewhere 20 years, they may have access to 15, 20, 30 systems. Make sure you offboard them the way, you know, when you've onboarded them, because their credentials and access is very important. So that's just something I wanted to throw out there. That's a big thing, classification of your data, knowing where it's at, knowing the applications. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Oops. There we go. And this kind of, we're circling back to work, because I know remote work, just like you mentioned, Stuart and Debbie, remote work, right? It's become big in the last couple of years. And the equipment that is being used within nonprofits, we've touched on it, but some people are using their personal computers, right? The nonprofit may not have enough money, that they're just using the personal computer. And that may be the same computer that is being used by their student in their school, right? And the same computer watching Netflix, on doing other apps. So you have your work being used, the data, as Debbie had mentioned, coming down. So it's so important to really know your assets that are out there, if they're being used personally, or if they're being used that, you know, something that you've issued. Donated computers. A lot of nonprofits get donated computers. They don't have the IT person to do that clean wipe sweep, to reinstall Windows or reinstall Catalina, or do something to that laptop and that equipment. So we don't know what is sitting in there, right? There could be malware, there could be something, and they don't know. And they continue kind of on their day doing their job. Could be a keylogger sitting on that laptop. So this is another thing that we go through the nonprofits to understand, do that asset management. What assets do they have, And going back to what you said, Stuart, being able to doing those scans of seeing what's out there and not doing it once a month on a Sunday evening, right? So that's a big thing, is the equipment that they're using. They're using technology, they're using equipment, they're putting data in it, and they have a mission. Again, it circles back to the mission that the nonprofit has to serve people, to be out there doing what they do best, and we want to support them with that. So any questions on that, or Debbie, you want to add anything about remote work, what you've seen?
Well, just what we talked before is usually the computer is their personal computer. If it's not, it's a very old computer, and people do multitask on it. They do work and personal stuff. And again, they don't do any kind of, I don't even know, some of the people I know wouldn't even know how to update the computer or the software or things. The other thing that I just put in the chat I'm dealing with now is the transmission of sensitive data like W-2s, because people are home, and now the payrolls they're not sending them in the mail anymore. You got to download them. So what's some of your thoughts about protecting like data like that when you have to send them via email?
Wow. So you're getting, use hopefully that, whoever you're working with, that they would be able to download from the site. One of the things that I know that people are doing, that they are downloading it to their work or personal computer, the W-2. You want to make sure you're using a secure email provider, right? And this goes working. A lot of nonprofits don't have an IT. So if they've using a Google, a Gmail, or Workspace, that security, that when they've gone and got that should be a secure way of managing it. Most of those providers are doing a secure email. I would stay away from some of the free emails out there that I know Hotmail doesn't exist anymore. Microsoft bought them over, but a couple of those other emails out there that weren't HTTPS when they were sending their email, that you want to make sure it's secure, definitely.
And I'll share another thought with you. I was at Staples the other day, and the guy told me that a lot of people are bringing in their quote work computers because they want to upgrade it or something. But when he asked them, "Is your computer backed up?" they say no. So it's like, okay, so now all that data could have been wiped out just because you're upgrading, the whole computer or something. They say no, not backed up.
Yeah, backups are important, definitely. Backups are important. There was one other thought that I was going to mention, and there was something that you were saying before. Oh, I know what it was. Some nonprofits have mentioned they have an IT department.
Yes.
And IT, when I think of IT, your support, your help desk, you're out there, they're out there. When they do have that IT, they're doing that. Not all IT is doing security. And that's just, if there is a nonprofit or a small business, if you have an IT, if you're outsourcing to IT, make sure that they're also doing security for you, right? And I think that's a key to really understand that. What is it, the services that an IT department is giving you, and what are the services that are security that you have? So like these vulnerability assessments that we spoke about, it was a high percentage not doing that. Well, some of these organizations may have the IT guy, they may have a help desk guy that's giving them their laptop, right? That may be patching their system. That would be great if they're patching their laptop, but they're not doing these scans. They're not finding these vulnerabilities. And so that's something to think about, is if you are contracting out to an IT department, or if you have an IT, what are they doing, and what are your security needs? So it's just one thought I had.
It's a lot to do. All the nonprofits.
Yeah. Any advice specifically for the nonprofit education space? the nonprofit education space as in, could that be defined a little bit more? Do we know?
I would, I would just think of that as, as it relates to, K through 12 or school districts specifically.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the IT department and security. What security is being done. A lot of the K through 12, the experience that I've had having kids in that in that school recently in that age range, some of them have been hit by ransomware. People that I know that they've been hit by ransomware, they've had an IT department. They had a file server. When they were hacked, they didn't have the processes in place for security. And they're still 2 years later are trying to recoup from that. So again, I think going back to IT, because I've worked in IT departments and security, really look that that you have security in place. Debbie mentioned backups. Make sure you have backup. Make sure you have access management. Make sure the credentials that are out there, do that review who has access. If somebody's left, take that away. If they have privileged access, which means higher, many of you may know or may not know, privileged access. I hear that in IT and I remember for always like, what does privileged access mean? They have more access, right? They have higher, they're like a system administrator, they're a super admin, they have a lot of access. Who has that and should they have that? So it's doing that deeper dive into that, where I don't think IT is doing that all the time, because IT's role, get the computers out, somebody needs access to this folder, somebody needs to be put into this permission group, right? They're doing all that stuff and they're not asking the questions why or for how long. So,
we did get a question about vulnerability scanning, and somebody asked, are they free or they are affordable? Scanning services you suggest, obviously people can do a free trial on nodeware.com if they're interested in doing a free trial to see Nodeware. They can also contact you, and they can run a trial through you as well. So there's multiple ways they can do that. And maybe you want to talk just a little bit further about, after a trial, how could you, if there's different things that you do to support nonprofits once they've identified what are their vulnerable devices. To your point, how can they segment their devices so some devices aren't connected to critical data from a tagging, from a grouping standpoint, and maybe you can talk about, it doesn't matter whether it's a Windows device, a Linux device, a Chromebook, a Mac, you can scan all those and what you could potentially do to help them.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I started Pocket Security to be a nonprofit for nonprofits, right? I know the importance of nonprofit. I myself had worked in the nonprofit world for about 10 years, and I saw what was happening within the nonprofits. And what we do is, as Stuart mentioned, yes, we'll do the vulnerability scanning for you. Are there security providers that give nonprofits discounts? We're working with them. That's part of our mission, is to work with providers to see what can we do to help the nonprofits for less than what they're charging the big corporations for. Trying to get the donation, trying to get that price where it makes sense for the nonprofit to cut that down. So we are looking at working with vendors to help with vulnerability scanning, AV protection, all that type of stuff. We're working with internally, we have volunteers that can help with risk management, business continuity, data classification. Those are the services that we offer. And that's where we want to help to get them in a good place. Also PCI, the payment card industry, nonprofits and maybe small business, maybe you're taking credit cards. I'm not sure if everybody's aware of PCI, but I'm a PCIP, and setting up the compliance to be able to accept credit cards, right? And knowing what to ask your providers, security assessments to your third-party vendors, and who are they dealing with, right? Because your third-party vendor may be dealing with a fourth-party vendor or a fifth-party vendor. So you want to find that out and where your data is sitting.
To that point around compliance, we've been fortunate enough to have folks from the CIS 18 and from NIST talk about, things they're doing to help small businesses and nonprofits specifically get started. Whether it's the stage 1 data gathering of NIST that Nodeware meets, or whether it's CIS 18 and some of the things that Tony Sager and their group have done. Do you want to comment a little bit about, compliance and what are the compliance issues that a nonprofit needs to think about, and how potentially you can help them kind of on that path?
Sure. Well, I'll pass it to Debbie to talk about compliance of, like she mentioned earlier, what nonprofits are doing, and then I can talk about what Pocket Security can do to help that. So Debbie, like nonprofits, are they expected to follow? They are, even though they're a nonprofit, like we mentioned earlier, they're running like a business. From the compliance perspective, what are the things that they need to be able to meet?
Could you define a little bit more what you mean by compliance? There's all kinds of compliance when you're a nonprofit.
Sure. I mean, yeah, there are, I guess, regulations. So if I'm a small nonprofit, if I'm a small organization that I'm mentoring kids, what are the types of things that do I need to stay compliant, that I need to, dot my I's, cross my T's to continue doing that business, that work?
Well, there's, the government, that you're registered and stuff like that. But bigger than that, the small nonprofit doesn't really, in this case, probably have a whole lot of compliance. Unless you have a government grant. If you have a government grant, state, federal, anything like that, county grant, there's all kinds of compliance built into that grant. So a lot of times when you get that money, the money's you spend a lot of money into complying with their rules of what you can collect, what you can't collect, where, all these different things. Because I was just thinking, something popped in my head a minute ago, that not only just the donors and the service people, I'm thinking if they get those records, they also get access to credit cards. Okay, so your credit card information. So it's a bigger reach. I mean, if I'm a donor, you get my credit card, not only did you hack in. So there's a lot of rules around that, particularly state and government funding, of how the data is protected, how's it secured, they run tests, and that takes up a lot of time. But I don't know that the small nonprofits are even thinking about that at this time.
Right. So that, going to your question, sir, so that's it. It's they're not, on some of them don't need to follow those compliance rules, right? Like where the bigger organizations have fill out the SOC 2s and do the HIPAA and do all of that. They don't, but when you look at them, they're holding all this information, right? So that's part of what we're doing, is to get them into compliant, to at least meet that, right? For NIST with the security awareness, following those guidelines, and that's what we're bringing to them. So I look at NIST, I look at CIS and PCI, looking at those different compliance structures and looking at the best practice, if there is a best practice, or using those tools and guidelines to help them at least get organized, that they are having those checks and balances, right? Because if they do grow or do something, they will need, or if they do get this grant, they're expected. I know some grants, some of the nonprofits, Debbie, maybe you're aware of this. I know some of the nonprofits we've talked to, when they're applying for cyber insurance, as some of them are, they're asking them to check the boxes. And I know we've talked to check the boxes in compliance, and are they doing this or are they doing that? And some of them aren't, right? Are they scanning? Are they doing, well, no, 96% of them aren't scanning. So but those are questions that are being asked. So that's what we're trying to bring them up into, what's happening in the day-to-day in organizations.
And I also think when you have, if you're in certain sectors of the nonprofits, you have these caseworkers who are out, in people's homes and stuff, and sitting in their briefcase is a lot of information, right? So it's like, I think that's the opportunity, I think, to the small to medium, because I think the people who sign the contract, the people up, sign the HIPAA compliance and stuff, don't really pass it down to everyone else. I'm not saying they don't. But at certain levels, it's like, it's not monitored. It's like, yeah, we signed that. We know we're supposed to do that, but are you actually testing that that's being done, is what I'm saying, for like random somehow.
Yeah.
Small.
Yeah. So again, it's going back to, you don't know what you don't know. We need to make them aware. We need to help them get in I know one of our strategic advisors, he says, we just need to make them better today than they were yesterday.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great start. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to put up our the next poll question while we're answering this question. So if people could respond to the poll question, we would appreciate it. And then at the same time, we got a question about, do you have any tips for sending sensitive data via email like a W-2? Any thoughts on that particular subject?
Yeah, I think that was you, Debbie. Yeah, I mean, definitely, your email providers, depending where's the source coming from and who is it going to, that's a big thing. But it's looking at your email providers, looking at your contracts. What have they said? How are they being managed? Because so much is being done through email. Some organizations have if you put secure in front of your email that you're sending, there's a provider where they would need to log in to that application, like they get a username and password. So if Debbie was sending me something and she put secure information, I would actually have to log in. I get a link, and I hate to say getting a link, but I would get a link to another application that has to verify me, who I am, as the receiver, and then I can get that information. So yeah, that's another way of doing it.
I think, if you just look at this poll question, it's interesting. You got, 88% of the people say they handle their own technology or cybersecurity in-house, or they're not sure, which I think just points to the needs. Some of these nonprofits, they need a little bit of assistance. They need some local guidance. They need some local support. They need some, hand holding in some of these critical areas. And we have found, it's the right time to, Alan Alford talked about this as the three legs of the stool, that, they need a little bit of education. They need a little bit of multi-factor authentication for a protection standpoint. And then they need a little bit of vulnerability management to understand what are the devices they have, what's accessible to their critical data, and how do they potentially segment that. Maybe that's worth, spending a second on kind of how you're starting to help those organizations, if they just want to get started.
Yeah. So usually what happens, if they just want to get started, I have an hour to talk to them, to talk to them and have me learn about their organization, look at their website, see what's going on their website, what they're doing, and to ask those questions. Again, what applications do they have? If they know, it's doing that inventory that we all put off to see what to do, but that's so important, because then you'll find things. What applications do you have in your organization? Who has access to what? What data do you know is out there, and have you classified your data? So we do a security assessment, asking them the questions, starting very, very high level, and then start digging in a little bit deeper. Like, for example, one organization that I was working with, they had the IT guy, and I'll put that in quotes, they had the IT guy, who was a friend of a board member who had worked in IT, and I think had worked in telecom prior to that. So, oh yeah, we have our data. I said, okay, great. Is it our secure data? It's on a server. Okay, where is it? It's in our office. Okay, where in your office? Behind, it's locked. It's in a locked room. I'm like, okay, great. Who has the key? Well, I have the key. Okay, and where's the key? It's in my desk. Okay, and is your desk locked? No. So now this data that is very important to them, they thought it was secure in this room that they had at their office, but the key, anybody could access that key and get to that server. So it's kind of following the breadcrumbs. It's just going down the path of where their information is, who has access, and just having that discussion and finding out, where to start. And then from that, we can go, okay, I think this is a good place to start. This is a good place to start. And again, depending on the budget, we're working on, as a nonprofit, getting funds, getting donations to help offset the cost. But what we want to do is, if I only had $25, for example, and I had 2 doors into a room, and I could only put a lock on one of them, and it was $25, at least I could do it on one of the doors, right? Instead of having both of them open. So it's having that discussion, seeing what we can find, doing that deep dive, and then just doing that analysis of where we want to begin with them.
So Debbie, we have 2 questions. One of which you may be able to help with is, where can nonprofits go to get funding or grants to be able to get started to protect their critical data? Any thoughts and advice and counsel from that standpoint?
Well, there are, yes, there are funders, there's funders all over the United States. You just have to search for, and one of the things that we do is we have monthly, and they'll start up again, online grant research, so we could go to these different directories and find out who's funding that. Cybersecurity, it would be under a technology grant. And if you're just starting out, I don't want to be discouraging. If you're just starting out for the very first time, it's hard to sometimes get a grant. But if you've already done it, now it's looking at the searching and finding out the funders. And that's an interesting question, because Leda, I think what I'll do is do some research on who funds cyber technology. Depending on where you are, where the funders are, what are the requirements. So it's basically finding them out, staying connected, asking other people, like Leda's working on some connections and things like that. And a lot of times the grants that are coming now, or the funding are coming now, are coming from individuals that have a foundation that support this kind of technology. So it's not always the big corporations. It's people that you just have to search for them, and it's we can make a list and I'll send it out to Leda. But it's also to think about some of your partners, like who funds you, and would they fund someone else? So it's a little game of trying to find them, but I bet it's out there. I'm betting on it.
So we should do this. We should put up the last poll question. This is always an important topic when we look at remote workforces and hybrid workforces, and how often is a vulnerability management scan. And I think it also leads to some of the conversations about, how potentially, Leda, your organization and others can help out. And then if you could just elaborate, we got one more question about grants, and if you could elaborate a little bit more about, where some of the grants might be available, some recommendations either that you have for grants that you could make available to nonprofits to help assist, or where they ought to be looking at grants where they can get funding to go from there.
Okay.
You go ahead while this is running.
Oh,
okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I'll just jump in just because of this vulnerability scanning, what you're mentioning, Stuart. One thing I wanted to add was that, we can do the scan for them as well and help prepare a document for their board. So the board can help with they may have connections too with funding, but being able to show why the need. I think a vulnerability scan actually tells the story of why the need to help for funding for cybersecurity.
Perfect. No, that's a great point.
Yeah.
And anything on? Oh, I'm sorry, Debbie.
I was going to say, on my side, there's all kinds of. We have a site called IE Nonprofits, and we put up the current grants there. And we're going, based on all this that we're working out, we're going to find some of the cyber grant opportunities. You can also do Foundation Directory. That's a subscription based, and you search by different criterias. And there's another one, believe it or not, it started out as small family community foundations. It's called grantgopher.com. It's only $9 a month to subscribe to, but they're smaller grants. Well, I say smaller, they're $1,000 up to $25,000, but they're small family foundations, and they're very specific of who they fund, but they're very easy to apply to most of the time. because they just want to get the money out. So those are some tips, and I'm going to put together a directory now that I'm talking about this, and make sure you get that too. So yeah, because we have this directory site, but we haven't specifically gone with cybersecurity.
Well, Debbie, if you could do that, if you could send us the link to that, we'll make sure that gets included in the email that goes out for both the people that registered and attended, and the ones that registered and might watch the rebroadcast on YouTube.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
So we're down to our last few minutes. Once again, I appreciate the two of you and the time that you've taken to help educate these folks. Are there, just some closing remarks, some thoughts you have on, if you're a nonprofit, how do you get started? What can you do? How does this work? I'd just be curious to your perspective, because it seems like so many people right now are part of this underserved market. That you looked at some of those percentages and some of the data. How do they get started? How do they reach out to you? How do they get help? We're happy to obviously help you, and we're happy to help them. We're happy to provide a discount for the nonprofit organizations that come to you for assistance or are part of our trials that will connect to you. So just curious if you kind of want to elaborate on that, maybe a couple of closing remarks.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Stuart, again for having us today. I started Pocket Security again because it is so important. As I know nonprofits do great work, and their mission, again, going back to what I said earlier, just they have a mission and they're passionate about it. There's a lot of people that work in nonprofits that don't have to work in a nonprofit. They're not taking the big paying jobs, but they're doing the work, and they're using technology, and they're working with data that across the board, it's the same like working in a big business organization. So I'm very passionate about security, and I'm passionate about nonprofits, and I want to basically share the information that I know and the connections and the network that I have. And Pocket Security, if you look at our website, we've built a great strategic advisors. We have the connections of people that want to help. Everybody that we spoke to that wanted to join our board and our strategic advisors is very passionate about helping others. So we have that network. We want to help. We want to get the nonprofits to be safe and secure. You may have seen that there was an incident this week with a big nonprofit whose website was hacked, right? And this was a big organization that probably had IT people, I'll say. I'm not sure if they had security people, but it happened. So we are pocketsecurity.org. That's our website. There's a contact form on there. You can contact us. My email's up there. Feel free to reach out to me. We want to help. We'll get things started. And one more thing I do want to mention is also the security awareness. We have a security awareness program that we can work with the teams, understand the roles within your organization, and tailor it to you. So that's what we do. Thank you.
Debbie, any last thoughts?
I would say very similar. I'm personally, and our organization is very passionate about helping nonprofits grow and be stable and continue to be here. So for us, we just we'll now have a new series of workshops and classes, and anyone can join them because everything's remote at the moment. And then I just put in the chat, it's either academygo.com, that's our main website, or ienonprofits.com. And then that would be opening everyone up to grant research, what's available, things like that. But we're very passionate about getting them informed. Most of the time, they're really busy. Their primary focus is their clients or trying to get money. So we have to wake them up a little bit about how important this is. And Leda and I are working on a series of workshops, and we'd like to work with everyone to just get them started, little baby steps, and get them talking. And the more and more they hear about these bigger ones getting it, then I think it's really important to get the information out, because most people don't think about it until something happens. I can tell you, the smart ones are like, "What?" No. So I've enjoyed the time, and hopefully we gave you some good information.
Perfect. Well, we have a series of these sessions that are going to continue. The next one is specifically around information sec and how do you provide information? How do you do information for small business leaders? Once again, how do you help them get started? That comes up in February. We also have one around small healthcare organizations that we're doing with our partner Security Studio that's coming up as well. And then we will have one specifically on cyber insurance in March, specifically around cyber insurance and what do you need to know as a small organization? How do you evaluate it? How do you be prepared for it? So you will see all of those on our website. You'll see all those on LinkedIn. We'd appreciate it if you can connect with us there. If you have any specific questions, feel free to submit them either on our info on our website, or feel free to do it in LinkedIn. All three of us are connected on LinkedIn. We're part of the community. We're all about community building. That's one of the reasons why specifically we formed those the open demo peer Q&A sessions, because it's an opportunity for someone who's not ready for a demonstration or doesn't want to see a demonstration, but wants to hear what people are thinking about, wants to hear and see what questions they have. We've launched these open demo peer Q&A sessions just to give you an opportunity to go do that. So those are available once or twice a month. We're going to make those available for everybody who's interested in a little bit of information. And then once again, our charter is all about these public service announcements, educating people and SMB leaders, the vast majority of which maybe have one IT person or one security person, or maybe no IT person or no security person, or somebody's cousin who provides some desktop support. And how do you help that person educate the executives, their boards, their investors, their donors, as to here are a couple of simple things that we can do to make ourselves just a little bit smarter, a little bit safer, once again, keeping our critical data protected. And if, God forbid something happens, we have the ability to return from a business continuity standpoint. So I want to thank everybody for participating. Please join us on LinkedIn. Obviously like and comment and share the different events that we have going on. And if there's anything that we can do to help support nonprofits, either directly or through Leda, we are happy to do that. We are in the matchmaking business. So any nonprofit that needs cybersecurity help, we want to connect them to Leda and to others. And if you have a current MSP that you work with, we'll be happy to work with that MSP to make sure they're providing you what you need to be successful and to be smarter and safer. So with that, Leda and Debbie, I just want to thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it. And we talked about doing some other things together. I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for letting us be here today.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for attending, and we'll see everybody on the next session.
Bye. Leda, you got to call me. I got lots of ideas.
Awesome.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you.